Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to do a review of the current changes. This is going to be the ones that come into effect in July 2026 for the state of Texas for our TREC, Texas Real Estate Commission changes. I'm Andrew. I'm a trainer and developer here. I did a couple different work here in San Antonio and other areas around here at EV Title, some other places. I love to train and share. Also a real estate broker. So I'm going to go through some of the biggest ones, and not every single one. It's the biggest ones that are going to affect us as agents. I have a full list so you can follow along. Here's all the list of all of them that we're going to be going over and kind of talk about, so you can help you understand the new contracts that are coming out that are going to have to be used. They're already available in your zip forms. Some people are already using them, but some people are going to wait. So if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so. Love you to join the family, and we'll get right into it. We're first going to talk about the listing agreement, the exclusive right to sell, exclusive right to list, whatever you want to call it. I'll make my screen a little larger so you can see it easier. I'm going to go through the biggest major changes as we go through it. Not every single thing. Some of them are just like the capital letter, some simple things like that. We're not going to talk about that as much because that's just the capital. Some things that you actually need to know to change your business. So one of the first things they did add generators in here as an improvement. So if you have like a Generac generator or anything like that that's built into the home, anything like that is considered an improvement. You can't, again, permanently installed and built-in items. Make sure you take the time. Make sure you don't, if there's someone has that, they can't take it with them unless it's an exclusion, of course. That's a new thing, they added generator. I guess that was causing trouble. The big thing, of course, is the commission changing. So you can see all this pink, red, whatever you want to call it, is all gone now. So there's no longer any broker to broker or broker to owner fees. You can't choose between the two for compensation. Broker to broker compensation is now gone. Oh, let me open that back up again. Sorry about that. It's only broker to owner compensation. What that means is when you have a listing, you're only worried about your commission as a listing agent. You're not worried about the buyer's agent's commission right now. Well, I'll jump into the 1 to 4 in a minute and show you what it's going to look like when we get into the 1 to 4. So you'll be able to understand kind of like how the buyer is going to ask to get their commission. So this, again, if you go here in the listing agreement under section 5, this is section 5A now, broker fee. So when earned and payable, seller will pay broker, select all that apply, insert amount to be paid for to broker only for services performed. So if you do a 3%, say usually you would charge 6 for a lot of agents, and they do 3 and 3 instead. And they split half with that, or 5%, 2.5, 2.5, whatever you're going to do. So now you would just put only your percent in here, nothing else. You wouldn't put anything with the other agent. Now, if you have an unrepresented buyer and you're going to handle, both sides, anything like that, whatever you want to call that, then you can put in an amount here. So I could do 3% here and 2% more if the buyer is unrepresented, and you're going to be handling both sides. Things like that are now part of the contract to be built in. This line 3 is if you wanted to put anything in yourself. Again, we're not lawyers as a real estate agent, so you shouldn't put anything in there. It'd be very rare that you'd want to put something. Some people want to do like a sliding fee. If after 6 months the home doesn't sell, I'm only going to pay 2% instead of 3%. That would be something like that they could put in. But clear it with your broker. You're not lawyers. Don't put anything in there that you're going to regret. So make sure, I recommend leaving this empty. Line 1, what you're going to get paid as a listing agent. We don't worry about the buyer's agent right here, only yourself as a listing agent. And then here if the other side is unrepresented. Now you do need to talk to your client, of course, when you do a listing presentation that, hey, usually the other agent gets paid. So that's going to be something they need to take into account. They need to understand when you're doing your presentation. So you might want to do a seller's, a net sheet for seller net sheet. Have one for, 6%, 5%, 4.5%, whatever you do for your commission breakdown for each side. Again, you can do either one. It's all negotiable. And then that way you can show them what it would cost and what they're going to take back depending on what commission the buyer side gets. So this is a big change that's come out. Another thing, see, a lot of these are just like you see, they changed some of the letters. Not a big deal. Make sure nothing else big in this one. So it says, if broker acts as an intermediary, seller understands that seller remains responsible for payment of the broker fees in 5A, and anything agrees to pay the buyer as compensation. So what that means, if the selling agent is an intermediary, right here, they're going to be paying this and the little piece here. So this could be 3%, this could be 2%, and that would be a total of 5%. That's what they're trying to let the people understand there. That's what that says. I think that's all the big changes in the selling one. Of course, they also have this new seller's disclosure in groundwater and surface water rights. This is a new disclosure that it was never used before. We'll show you what this looks like in a minute when we get to that part. But that's brand new disclosure, ready to go. So make sure you have this, and we'll show you what this is going to be used for. It's just like a seller's disclosure, and I'll show you in the 1 to 4 list. If you don't need that, it gives you a better idea, like, do we have these? If you do, you need it. And we'll go over that in a minute. And nothing else has really changed. Again, the biggest change in the sell exclusive right to sell or the listing agreement is the commission. You're now only worried about what you make as an agent, not what the buyer agent makes. And then this is if the buyer is unrepresented. Okay, that's that one. Now I'm going to jump into 1 to 4. Again, generators are there too. This just changes, you can see some of the, makes it legal, makes it bigger, changes some of the wording. Now, a big thing they did change in here, well, it's not really a change, more of a clarification, is that they described what a Texas holiday. So right here, if I pull this right here and I copy that, I'm just going to open that and throw it in here. And then if I pull this right here, and you can pull up the statute, it'll show you what the government holiday would be. Okay, so here are the dates and the holidays. First day of January, Martin Luther King, President Memorial Day, Christmas Day. These are state and holidays. So you notice I don't have like National Pizza Day or something I use for a joke, but some people have tried to use things like that. So that's what they're saying. So again, when you deliver earnest and option funds, as you can see, the last day to deliver the earnest option funds or the additional earnest falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday at the time to deliver the earnest option funds. So if today, for example, let's pretend it's Tuesday, which it is. If today is Tuesday, today is day 0 of signing date. Day 1 would be Wednesday, day 2 would be Thursday, day 3 would be Friday. I'd have till the end of the day Friday to get the earnest and option funds. But let's say they'll win under contract Thursday. Day 0 is Thursday, day 1's Friday, Saturday, Sunday don't count. Right here, Saturday, Sunday don't count. And then Monday doesn't count if it was a holiday. So then day 2 would be Monday unless it's a holiday. And if it is, then we'd be over to Wednesday, Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, at the end of Wednesday. So with the holiday, you have to remember your holidays don't count, your weekends don't count, and holidays don't count. So you have to pay attention. So you might have a 10-day option, but remember the option period, those days count, and it's going to take every day. It's every calendar day after day 0. So if you have a 10-day option and you try to push the delivery of earnest and option funds for 5 days, you just lost half your option period before you can even do an inspection. So that might be something to think about when you're getting with your buyers. Make sure you have legal holidays. Now, if I jump down to the section here, again, they cleaned up a little bit of the wording. They got rid of a couple little things, nothing big there. When you jump down, this is the one about the disclosure, about the seller's disclosure in groundwater surface. So this is saying, if there's any surface water, I'll tell you kind of what it is. So the big way to understand it is to look at section 3. So seller is not required to deliver because all the following are true. So if any of these is on the property, you need a surface water. Aware of a water well on the property, in use or not in use. So any type of water well. So if there's a well on the property, even if it's capped, you still have to have it. If there is a pond, a lake, or a water tank on the property, you need this form. Okay, that's something. So even if it's a dried up pond, lake, water tank, even if you have a tank you just collecting rainwater, that's considered a tank, a water tank. Make sure you understand that. So and then again, a certificate of adjoining, filling, permitting, surface rights with the TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. If you do anything like that, that's more usually for farmers and people like that. you need to have this form. Water rights to the property have been severed, sold, or leased whole in part. This more applies to like farm and ranch when they're paying and they have water leases and they're paying, renting it to other people. All that comes into effect. So anything with water, or if you're in a following municipality like a MUD, WSC, HUD, PWC, PUD, anything like that, you need to have that form. So again, anything with water, I say if you have water on the property, even if it's dried up rivers, well, it doesn't talk about, it does pond lakes, rivers are flowing, that's riparian rights and stuff. But if you have that water rights there, make sure you take care of that. You have to have this form. Okay, now if you don't put the form in there and you're a seller, the main thing to remember, this is just like the seller's disclosure. If buyer does not receive the seller's disclosure, the seller's water disclosure, buyer may terminate this contract anytime prior to the closing and the earnest money will be refunded to the buyer. Okay? You got to make sure you have it. And then again, after that, et cetera, et cetera. So you got to have the closing in there anytime you do it. So like if you're on the selling side and the buying agent puts 1 day in here, pay attention to that. That's going to be different. So you got to pay attention. Okay, I'm going to jump down to the commission part. So in section 12, we still have our seller concessions right here at the top. Not that has changed. That is still the same, but they got rid of this broker fee thing above it. That's gone now. So right there, that's fine. We have our seller concessions. This is all going to be how you get paid on the buy side now if you're a buyer's agent. Okay, so right now, as I mentioned right here, broker commission is set by law, fully negotiable. Each party should pay their respective brokers, et cetera, et cetera. Contributions under year should be applied and not change the party's obligation to pay to those agreements. So what they're all saying is if you're a buyer's agent and you want to get paid 3%, you're going to put 3% here. So it says seller will pay 3% of the sale price to be applied toward the broker compensation owned by buyer to buyer's broker. Remember, as a buyer's agent, your buyer is responsible to pay your commission, not the seller. Usually the seller does pay it, but the buyer is the one, because you have a buyer tenant rep, and we'll show you that changes in that one too. Not big changes in there, but they do have some. So your buyer is responsible. So you have to remember that. That's what this first box says. This is what, as a buyer's agent, you want to get paid. The second box gives you a little bit opportunity, which I kind of like how they put that in there, which means if you really, really want the house and you know it's a multi-offer situation, the buyer can say, I'm going to pay part of the seller's commission to save the seller. So the listing agent's commission to save the seller from having to pay it. So I might put my commission here at 3%. And then the buyer says, I really, really want the house, Andrew. I really want it. I'm going to pay the listing agent's commission of 1% here. And I know that adds to my closing costs. I know I'm going to have to pay that. That's okay. I'm going to pay that so I have it. That'll add 4%. And then the buyer, instead of just paying 3%, you now have 4% closing costs the buyer has to come up with. 3% will go to the agent for their buyer tenant rep payment. The rest will go to the pay a percent of the listing agent's commission. So you have that option now. Now right here for the expense, if a government loan program regulates buyers from paying charges or fees, the amount of any concession that we talked about up here shall first be applied to pay such prohibited expenses, then to buyer's expenses, but not broker compensation. So you can't use seller concession anymore for government loans to pay broker compensation. So if you have an FHA loan and there's 6% max seller concessions, for example, and it's a $300,000 loan, that's $18,000. 6 times 3 is 18. That's $18,000 you would have in seller concessions if you got full concessions. You need 3% for closing. Usually that's a good rough estimate. Most people charge 3%. Some banks will charge more. Some lenders add extra fees, so it's more. And builders always like to add extra. That's fine. That's part of the cost of doing business. Most good broker for lenders will be 3%. So 3%, I have 3% left. I can use 2% to help buy the rate down, save my money there, and use 1% for whatever else I need. I might want to use it to get a really cool home warranty, use some more a little bit for rate buy down. I know there's only a certain amount. The lenders are already going to be saying, you can only use so much. I understand that. I'm just using examples. You can also use it for money that can come back. Anything you put down in earnest for VA, FHA loans like that, your earnest funds can come back for that amount, your 1%. So there's different ways to use it. That's a whole different talk. And that's how that commission has changed. I think those are your biggest changes. Of course, there's a couple down here. Make sure seller and buyers will prompt any documents. They're saying if you owe anything for the foreign person, anything, it's important that you have that. A title company, they're going to help you make sure you have that as well. They changed the look of this a little bit to make it a little easier to understand for notices. If you skip down, when you go down a little bit lower here, they cleaned up the way these are all financing, leases, etc. to understand it better. They got rid of the old look to it. And you notice here, it's easier to see this is the seller's agent or the listing agent. Here's the buyer's agent. Here's intermediary. And all this is gone. All the red is gone. There's nowhere to try to put your commission at the bottom. It's only in section 12 like I showed you. Then they changed a couple words, okay? That's the big change there. I'm going to show you the buyer tenant rep. Now that one, this right here, this section should not be left blank for market area. You can't put like San Antonio and surrounding areas. You have to put like Bexar County and, you could, things like that, San Antonio, Converse. You could put county, you can put subdivision, you could put an address if the client only wants you to represent them to show one address, you can do that. Anything like that that you want to do. You want to make sure you have something in there though, because it's important to make sure you can get paid that way, because this is what the buyer tenant rep is going to cover. Now, the other big change, this is kind of cool. They put this in here and not a big change, just adding attendance at open houses or property showing with other brokers or sales agents where no advice, opinion, negotiation, or substantive, can't even say it today, broker services are provided does not violate these obligations. If attending an open house or property showing without a broker, without your agent, clients will tell other agents, brokers, sales agents, sellers, landlords that they have a client currently has an agreement with another broker. So your client can go to an open house, things like that. Without you being there, that's okay. But they are responsible. Make sure when you do your buyer tenant representation, they're responsible for letting them know, I already have an agent. They can't agent shop. That's not going to happen anymore. Same thing, broker fees, ready to go. Now, they kind of added this so people understand. So this is saying, if you read through all the little crossouts, I'll try to read, it's hard to read through the crosses, but a client may seek to obtain payment of the broker fees specified in Section A, and that's right up here, this section right here. However, from the landlord, seller, all that. However, client remains responsible for payment of the broker fee specified in that only by the amounts contributed by the seller. So pretty much it means if they go into buyer tenant rep and I put 4%, and the seller's only paying 3%, they owe me 1% at closing. Now, if you want to make them do that, if you want to write that off, if you want to just count it as a loss, whatever you're going to do, that's up to you. But that does change a little bit. They're making the client know very straight out, you are responsible for paying the buyer's commission. The buyer is going to hopefully be able to, the buyer's agent is hopefully going to be able to get the listing agent to cover it with negotiations in the 1 to 4. But if the seller decides that, no, I'm not paying it, I've decided not to pay any commission, you still have to pay. So that's been changed. See any other big changes or anything made? So again, right here, broker acts intermediary, they're saying the same thing. They're still going to have to pay. The listing agent still has to pay. Okay, that's the biggest changes in those. The seller's disclosure, let me find the other seller's disclosure, not that one yet. So this one, again, a couple little things has changed. Some of the bigger changes, they added some things. So right here in section 3, are you aware of any of these conditions? They added private road or adjoining property. If you have an easement and you're responsible as the seller is responsible for maintaining it, and the new buyer is going to have to take over that maintenance, that's something right here. If there's concrete camps or anything like that, you have to have that. any subsurface pits, storage tanks, above ground, anything 500 gallons or more that had chemicals. That means pesticides, farmers, anything like that. You have to talk about that, and any conservation easements. Okay, and then you have to explain what those are. The other part that I really like they put in here, this has been actually good to protect our buyers and our sellers, is the property currently covered by insurance? Is it currently covered by flood insurance? Is it covered by windstorm? And was there any reason you're unable to cover the property? And then you have to answer any of these questions. And have you ever filed a claim for property with any things for the National Flood Program? Have you ever had to proceed to claim for properties for settlement or awards? Pretty much that you did not use that money for the claim. So if you claim for a roof and you kept the money in your pocket and didn't replace the roof, they're asking you straight up, have you ever done that? Because that's happening more and more. People are being shady. And then down here, if you go a little lower, all that's kind of cleaned up. And then here's your HOA. They just cleaned up the wording some so it understands a little bit. And they also talked about more common areas. And now right here, this is section, let's see, skip up here. What is it? Section 10. So you skip here. So section 11. I missed that for a second. Section 11. So within the last 4 years, have you received any written inspections or reports or evaluations from persons who provide such? Roofers, HVAC, pest control, anything that people would come, like wood destroying insect, environmental special, anything like that, that's part of it, that you would have a written report. You need to now have that in here, the time, the date, and then attach the pages if you have it. Okay, like it says, under Texas law, you are required to disclose everything. If not, it can result in legal liability. The seller needs to realize if they hide anything from now on, they're now saying straight up, you're going to be held legal. And that's the biggest change in the seller concessions. Let's jump to the next one. The walkthrough only changed a little bit. We now have this sight unseen. So has buyer physically, not just visited, have they physically visited and reviewed the property, or they chose not to? Which means if you're videotaping the property and your client's walking through on a video, they have not physically viewed the property. So that's something you need to make sure you have in there. That's just a little change, but it's in there. Wire fraud, the only biggest change, they now put consumers instead of buyers and sellers, and they kind of worded a little bit, be careful, trusted source, make sure it's from a title company, seller, buyer, or tenant, other party involved in the transaction. They're saying be real careful. People are falling still to wire fraud, so we have to be careful about that. Now, this HOA, they changed up some of the wording. They made it a little easier in here. If the buyer is paying for the HOA, they caught up some of the extra crap of wording in there. They got rid of all that, made it a little easier. Now, down here, they're mentioning if this paragraph conflicts with any charges or anything like that, this paragraph will control. So what that means is this is the transfer fees or dues or whatever you want to call it, reserves, all that kind of stuff. So we have some, for example, in Dominion in this North San Antonio, their transfer fee is like $4,500 to $6,500. So if you only put $150, the seller is going to have to pay for anything else. So as a listing agent, you need to know what the transfer fees are so you can make sure you protect your seller. Please take the time to do that. Because if you put $150 in here and you all sign it, the buyer is going to pay $150 and the other $5,000-$6,000 is coming out of the seller's funds. You're going to have some angry sellers. Pay attention. They are having some things called beautification fees now that are showing up more and more, where people are trying to, HOAs are trying to add on extra fees to beautify, whatever that means. And it's usually up to almost $800 to $1,000. So you might usually have a $200 transfer fee. Now it's $1,200. And if you still put $200 without any other extra fees, they're going to get you and you're going to pay. So call your HOAs, talk to them, make sure you know what's going on so you don't get yourself in trouble. This is the new disclosure about groundwater and surface rights. So again, groundwater means water percolating below the surface of the earth. These are like deeper aquifers, things like that for water wells. Groundwater district is an area. Surface water, your lakes, rivers, creeks, streams, bays, estuary, arms of the Gulf of Mexico, all that is that. Surface water rights, if you actually have to use the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, TCEQ. You have surface water rights. Now, again, they said not everything needs a surface water rights from here. So again, if there's any groundwater, people are using it, you need to talk about it. And then a water well, of course, is you dig a hole in the ground for water. So information related. So is there any portion located in a groundwater district? Yes or no? Is there any water wells on the district? That's where you're going to talk about the well, all that. Is it plugged? Is it registered? Is it permitted? Do you share it? So again, who owns it? Who has it? Who shares it? Are they owned by the seller? Is there was it a whole plot of land that was subdivided and everyone shares the same well? All that. So what happens if something breaks? Do you have an agreement of understanding? If something breaks, who's paying for it? Who's fixing it? Is it shared? All that kind of things need to come into account. So do you say in the seller where the property receives water from a well on another property, not including all this, like another property well? Is there a water well in a hole in the groundwater owned or leased from the outside? So maybe you have a well, but you're leasing the water rights. You have to put that in there. Any groundwater ever been sold or leased or anything without the right to drill or operate a well on the property? So if you've sold all your water rights, you can't put any more water, any more wells, all that kind of stuff needs to be. And then, of course, do you have property to surface water? Is it for filling a junction? What are you going to use it for? And then is there a pond, lake, tank, anything with or without water? Even a dry pond, a dry lake, all that is without it. And then it just kind of talks about the seller may have knowledge, et cetera, et cetera. And then people, so this is important. Water is becoming more and more of a big issue in Texas, especially with the drought and everything going on. Please take the time to go through it and pay attention. Ask your clients. If it's a regular residential that's on city water, city sewer, and you're in a small lot, you're probably not going to use this, obviously. Anything outside the city, a little more country homes, it's Texas. There's a lot of country homes, a lot of wells, a lot of things. This is now all going to be coming into effect. And if you don't put that out there, you give the buyer a free out to get out of the contract anytime. So those are the biggest changes that are coming through. Make sure I got them all. I think I covered all the big ones. And then, of course, I do the short form buyer tenant rep. The same type of thing. It goes through here. Broker compensation. Saying again, everyone, if you can't, you got to pay what you're getting paid. If you put a fee in here, this is what they're going to have to pay. They have the open house part in there as well. And then it talks about, again, pay what you agreed to pay. You got to pay it. And then it just kind of talks about. And this also is in the long form, but they did put the limit of liability in here also for the short form. So make sure that's in there as well. And then they're going to get rid of this piece here. And that's your short form. So whichever buyer tenant rep you want to use. So hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions or any other forms you want to review, please leave a comment and share. Talk to you soon.